Welcome to a special edition of the Ryan Report, the 109th State House race. The Democratic and Republican candidates who are vying for that seat are with us, and we'll meet them right now.
From TV6, this is the Ryan Report. Here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, thank you for joining us for this special report. Following the tragic death of State Representative John Keevala, special elections were called to select a new state representative from the 109th District. In the primary in August, Democrat Sarah Cambenzi defeated 3 opponents to advance to the general election. Republican Rich Rosway was unopposed in the primary and is carrying his party's banner forward. Wade Roberts is the Green Party candidate. Our guests on this broadcast are Sarah Cambenzi, who serves as a commissioner for the city of Marquette, and Rich Rosway, who is president of the Marquette Area Board of Education. You know, our goal is to provide an opportunity for you to get to know the 2 major party candidates. We're not going to debate, but hopefully have a good discussion. Each of our guests will be given an equal opportunity to answer our questions, which are intended to help you to get to know each of them and to understand what they see as the critical issues in this campaign. We're not going to be using a clock, but in the interest of time, I've asked the candidates to try to limit their answers to about a minute. Sarah, nice to have you with us.
Thank you, Don. Nice to be here.
Rich, glad you could join us as well.
Thank you.
To both of you, welcome to the Ryan Report.
Thanks.
You know, there are a lot of issues we could talk about, and we will, but I want to give our audience a chance to get to know each of you. So let me ask you this question. Why did you decide to enter the race for the 109th House seat? And Sarah, let's start with you.
Sure. I think people of Michigan are hurting. Right now we have a state that is focused on selling ourselves as the tax break state. We have a governor and a legislature that have been pushing tax breaks rather than investing in people. And that's what I want to get back to, investing in our teachers, investing in our infrastructure, investing in jobs that put people to work, and not focus so much on what we can give away.
Rich, same question. Why are you in this race?
Well, you know, when I think the political divisiveness in our country with the past presidential election, it really got me involved in really looking at politics, and I really admire John Keevala. I work with John a lot in my role as school board president and talking about education, and I really admired his, you know, across the aisle way of working and building consensus with bipartisan support. So, you know, I felt that, you know, maybe with the success that I've had on the school board, I'd have an opportunity to be the rep for the State House, and really went and talked to my wife about it. And anyone that knows my wife, she was like, sure, it sounds like a great idea. And I entered the race.
Rich, this has been your first attempt at running in this kind of race. Is it turning out to be what you expected?
Well, no. I will have to say that it has certainly been overwhelming in terms of the effort, first and foremost. And, you know, certainly a lot of positives and also, I think, some negatives. But, you know, you have to kind of stay above that and stay on task. You know, when I mentioned that I was running because of the political divisiveness in our country, one thing I've learned is as I've campaigned and knocked on doors, that's been missing from that conversation. People are welcome, and they're willing to talk about the issues, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. And that's been really enlightening for me that, you know, people are worried about their families, they're worried about their jobs. There's some really fundamental worries. And so that's been a breath of fresh air for me, that I think we do have some commonality among all of us as Yoopers, and that divisiveness only seems to appear in social media or in some of those extreme cases.
Sarah, this is not counting the primary, your second run at this seat. What have you learned since the last campaign?
Well, I'll agree that it's hard work. It's a lot harder than running for a city commission seat where you're in the community you grew up in and people know you a lot better. So like Mr. Rosway said, it's a lot of getting out there, getting to talk to people, getting to meet them. putting the time in, often ignoring your family and things you like to do in your free time, but proving to the people that you're serious and that you really want to be the top contender for this seat.
You know, as this campaign is nearing the finish line, what do you see as some of the key issues in this campaign?
The things that I'm hearing most, education. The governor did a study, and we're underfunding our public schools by about $1,200 a student. The price for kids to go to college, they're getting out with basically house-size payments with their debt. Our infrastructure is crumbling, and when we look at revenue sharing, the city of Marquette alone is $8 million less in funding returned from Lansing since 2002. All that translates into what you're seeing on the ballots. You're seeing people asked to step up to invest more, take out additional mills for their roads, additional mills for their schools. And I think people are tired of it. People can't keep paying more. A lot of people out there are struggling to pay their bills, and they want someone who's going to stand up to them and stand up for them in Lansing and be a voice for them and not get tied into being kind of bought or running strictly that party line. So, that's what I've been hearing.
Rich, same question for you. What do you see as the primary issues as we come down to the wire in this campaign?
I'll agree with Sarah. Education, top of everyone's mind, and being involved for the past 17 years on the school board, we've really experienced a lot of the highs and the lows, and I agree that education, especially in the UP, is not funded at the level that we need to. I don't know whether every school district needs $1,200 more per student, because that would be millions of dollars more for Marquette schools. We are certainly underfunded. And when you look at a per pupil funding allowance with the state, it punishes literally every Upper Peninsula school and rural areas that have declining enrollment. Since I've been on the school board, we've went from roughly 4,300 students down to about 3,300. And when you do the math, it is literally millions and millions of dollars that we don't receive from the state. And back in, I forget when Proposal A passed, that was supposed to give taxpayer relief, but the only way we've been able to balance our budget has been by going to the community to pass a bond that we recently did, which allowed us to expand a couple of elementary schools and build an athletic complex. And then we passed the sinking fund, which was $10 million, $1 million for per year for 10 years. So we're not really giving that taxpayer relief, and so I believe the whole per pupil funding mechanism has to be thrown out, and we really need to go back to square one and look how we fund education.
Okay. I've got a lot more questions for both of these candidates. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. And welcome back to this special edition of the Ryan Report, featuring the two candidates in the 109th House race, Rich Rosway and Sarah Cambenzi. Let's talk a little bit about economic development. It's a concern for everyone, and I guess I want to know if it's a concern for you. And I also want to throw in the fact that should we be using our natural resources as a tool in economic development? That sometimes gets to be a controversial issue. Sarah, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I think our natural resources, it's our roots. It's our economy that the UP was built upon, and we can see the effect from the Empire Mine idling, just what that's done for Marquette County and beyond. Our timber industry, very strong. Not only does Munising have a paper mill, we also have one in Manistee. Those are both in the 109th district. And those are a lot of the solid, good-paying jobs that we have in natural resources. And mining isn't going to go away. We need to do it responsibly, but we also need to realize that if no one's in this seat fighting for it, and we're watching all of the investment for our iron ore mines go to Minnesota, there's an issue, and that means job loss. It means student loss to our public schools. It means taxpayers aren't paying taxes to live in our houses in our communities. So it's a full circle effect if we're not paying attention to those jobs in the natural resource sector.
question to you, Rich, is the same. You know, economic development, job development, using our natural resources or other means. What are your thoughts on the whole issue?
Well, absolutely, mining and the timber industry is at the backbone of the Upper Peninsula. And I think we need to be able to rely on those jobs. Those are sustainable jobs. You know, I hear a lot of talk about the tourism industry, and while that certainly is growing in Marquette County and really Alger, Luce, and Schoolcraft counties, those are not really sustainable jobs. They're seasonal jobs. You know, I take a little different look to economic development, and I know there's an organization that just was created called Invest UP, and there's a number of businesses, large employers in the UP. I believe there's 20 or 25 employers, and they all put in $25,000 into this organization for them to find ways to create more jobs. I mean, who knows better how to develop jobs than the private sector? And I think we as a legislator, you know, I'm not so sure our legislators are the best people to start trying to develop jobs. And so I'm really encouraged by that type of investment in the private industry to really look at ways to create jobs, and again, within whether it's mining, timber, paper products, et cetera.
Okay. You know, we know, Sarah, when you go to Lansing, if you go to Lansing, if you're the person chosen in this race, you will be part of the minority. The Republicans are in control of the House and the Senate and the governor's office as well. What will you do if you're elected to make sure that the Upper Peninsula's voice is heard in Lansing?
I think, you know, there's one issue right now that's on the table that has considerable opportunity to have both sides come together, and that's the no-fault car insurance and dealing with ways to reduce the cost to residents in Michigan. And you're seeing that right now. You're seeing Democrats and Republicans come to the table with ideas and a lot of conversation. And I think this could be the start after, you know, a lot of quickly implemented legislation from the Republicans, whether it's the dark money, you know, put into campaigns, you know, the funding for schools, taking away the pensions, stuff like that. I think we have a chance to look at no-fault insurance and say, we need to do what's best for the people. Both sides need to come together. There need to be concessions. But in the end, we need to make sure that we don't take it out on the people. You know, we need to look at ways that we hold insurance companies accountable for what they're charging and how they're coming up with those rates.
Rich, your version of that question, if you go to Lansing, you would be part of the majority. And I guess the question becomes, would you be willing to set aside party issues to support a UP environmental or UP coalition if that became important?
Absolutely. I think that to me, party is really secondary. And again, I go back to my work on the school board, nonpartisan. You do what's best for the taxpayer. And I think when you do that, it makes decisions very easy. And I believe in the 109th, it's the same thing. You know, my campaign slogan has been UP first. And I think that, you know, what's good for the UP is where you have to stand. You have to be true to yourself. And I believe that there's literally right and wrong. There are decisions that are right and wrong and what's best for the UP. I think that, you know, being a Republican with a majority of the House and Senate, maybe there's some benefits to the UP, but I look at what Mr. Keevala did in working across the aisle while he was in the minority, the amount of legislation he passed and the amount of support he received you know, with the legislature was really impressive. So I believe that there's an environment there that we can all work together for the betterment of the 109th.
Okay. We've reached that point when we have to take one more break. We'll be back with more on the Ryan Report in just 2 minutes. Again, we're talking with Sarah Cambenzi and Rich Rosway, the candidates in the 109th House race. There are so many issues we could talk about, but let's talk about the dark store issue, which has been with us for a long time now. And we'll start with you, Rich. You know, can you go to Lansing and do something about that issue?
That's a great question, because it seems like we've been dealing with this for an awful long time, and certainly the school board has been something that we have faced, and it's impacted our funding of our schools in the way of lost funding. And we've written letters to the tax tribunal, and at first we thought this was some kind of a bias on the tax tribunal, but we soon learned that they were interpreting the law correctly, and the result was undervalued property that ultimately impacts us. So it needs to go back to the legislature with bipartisan support to close that loophole. Because it's impacting our cities, our townships, our counties, and our school districts, and that's a big issue that we have to get resolved, and it has to be done legislatively, I believe.
And Sarah, do you feel you can go to Lansing and make some headway on this issue?
Absolutely. I feel that this is a legislative fix, and being in the minority party, all of the control to fix it has been on the other side, and we're seeing them not pay enough attention to it. They've called it just a UP problem, when in fact every county in our state has been impacted by this. And from that, and over the last 8 years, what you're basically seeing is them take it out on the average taxpayer. Instead of having the money now to fix our roads and our infrastructure, to give that revenue sharing back to our cities, our counties, they're coming back to the people and saying, well, in order to have nice roads, you have to pass a millage and pay a little more yourself. And that's what people are tired of. It needs to be a legislative fix, and I think getting a governor that will truly listen and not want to be a state that kind of protects big business and corporations, but actually wants to look at local government and small businesses, that's the fix.
We have a big problem, but only a couple of minutes left. We need a 30 to 45-second answer on this one. But we do have a drug problem in this country that's been described as an epidemic. It has to do with prescription opioids. Is there a role the legislature has to play in this issue? And Sarah, let's start with you.
Sure, I absolutely think we do. There hasn't been able to be a lot of movement in terms of kind of working with our pharmaceutical companies, working on the strength of the pills and everything we're seeing be issued to people. I think we're starting to see some movement in terms of law enforcement speaking up, their budgets being drained within the first 2 months from cleaning up meth sites, from people overdosing, all of that, to where we've got the attention of the state, and they're starting slowly to kind of put measures in place to say, okay, we need to come up with pseudoephedrine that basically, if it gets used in a meth lab, that it decomposes, breaks down to where it's just not working the way it needs to for those drugs. So I think we're getting there, but it's absolutely decimating our funding from our local police officers, as well as our Medicaid that helps people who have addiction issues.
Rich, your thoughts on the same question?
I've been knocking on doors in Ishpeming, and that is the first thing that so many people will tell you is that issue. But I don't look at it, I think criminalizing some of these things, you just keep throwing more and more people in jail, and I think our mental health component and intervention and the funding of mental health will go a long ways towards resolving that issue. My understanding is you don't have the beds to really be able to help people from a mental health standpoint. We really don't have psychiatrists and psychologists available that can help people. So just to continually throw people into jail and write more laws to throw them in jail adds more expense from a law enforcement standpoint and doesn't really address the issue, which is better interventions of mental health.
When we come back, we'll find out why each of the candidates feel that you should vote for them. Back in 2 minutes. And our final question for each of the candidates is, why should you vote for them? And let's start with Rich. Rich, why should they select you? Well,
I stand on my accomplishments and the entire board's accomplishment for the Market Area Public Schools Board. We've been able to handle some really difficult challenges, and we have money in the bank, and we're expanding, we're growing. And also, I think my background and some of my previous background, I was the director of marketing at Bell Hospital for a number of years. We built a new hospital. I was a key part of that. I represented the Keweenaw Bay Indian community, and the Ojibwa casinos during a really tumultuous time in their career, and we ultimately were able to get the casino in Harvey legalized through working with Governor Engler and Senator Levin and really the entire state. And I've been most recently working with the Teaching Family Homes nonprofit as a grant writer and PR director, and we developed a really successful program for them as well. So, you know, I rest on my background and my accomplishments, my leadership, and I'm going to be a hard worker, and in knocking down over 8,000 doors since the campaign, I think I've proven that I'm going to be the guy that's going to go to Lansing and work hard for the people of the UP.
And Sarah, why should they select you as their candidate?
Sure. I think over the past 5 years as an elected official for the city of Marquette, I've proven I'm not afraid to take the hard votes. I'm not afraid to ask the tough questions, and I'm not afraid to make sure that every vote I take is a vote taken to protect the best interest of the taxpayer as well as the majority. And I think, you know, my campaign is focused on the issues, and it's clear that I'm not tied to Lansing. I'm not a candidate that is doing, you know, their bidding. I'm actually the candidate that's coming out and saying we need to fix our schools, we need to fix our infrastructure. Mental health is a huge issue for the Upper Peninsula and the 109th, and these are the things that people want movement on, are the issues, and I've proven that that's the focus of my campaign, and certainly the focus when I'll get to Lansing.
Okay. I want to thank both of you for coming in, and you know, for our audience, this has been an unrehearsed discussion and a chance to get to know each of these candidates. I'll be back with a final thought in just a minute. You've met the Democratic and Republican candidates. Now the decision is yours. As we've discussed on November 7th, voters in Luce, Schoolcraft, Alger, and most of Marquette County will vote to send a new state representative to Lansing. Many other communities also have races and issues on the ballot. I hope this program has been helpful in giving you some insights into the candidates in this race. Thank you for joining us. And remember, voting in elections is a key to our form of government. See you at the polls.